In this video, we're going to show you how to install your rear wheel bearing. To get started on our job, let's make our way to one of the back wheels. We're going to safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. After that, continue on by removing all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Now with the wheel off, we have a nice clear view of our brake caliper. That's this area right here. We're going to continue on to removing each of our 14mm caliper slider bolts. You'll find one down low and one directly above it. We'll leave this one in here a little bit, continue on to the second. Now we can get both of these out of here. Inspect your hardware as you remove it. Make sure it's still reusable. It's not rotted or damaged in any way. Assuming it looks good, set it aside. Now we can carefully grab onto that caliper. We'll give it a little wiggle and remove it from the vehicle. The next thing you want to pay attention to is this area right here. This is considered the caliper piston. You want to make sure that it functions properly. We'll carefully press this in all the way until it bottoms out. There we are. Now give that a quick inspection. We're looking to see if you see any fluid. If you see any type of liquid here, it's more than likely brake fluid, in which case you'd have to replace the caliper. Ours looks good, so I'll set this aside, making sure I'm putting no pressure on my flex hose. Now we can start removing each of our brake pads. As you pop those out of there, you want to give them a quick inspection. Make sure it doesn't look like they're worn at an angle. If they're worn at a severe angle, typically that means that either the pad was frozen in the bracket or one of your caliper slider pins is frozen. Now we can start removing the caliper bracket from the area. Looking at this, you're going to find that you have two 14mm mounting bolts that hold it in place. Remove the pair. Once you have both of those off of there, continue by removing the bracket. We'll give this a quick inspection and set it aside. Now let's grab onto that rotor, we'll give it a little wiggle and remove it from the area. At this point, you have a clear view of the front of your wheel bearing. Let's have another look from the back. Now looking along the back side of this, you're going to find your ABS sensor. We're going to have to start disconnecting the wiring. You'll find a tab up along the top of this gray connector lock. We'll just grab that tab, carefully pop this apart, and then we'll remove the gray lock from the connector. I'll set that aside. With that out of the way, the next thing you want to do is reach up along the top of this black connector. You're going to find a tab that you can carefully squeeze on, and you should be able to separate this. If you can't squeeze it and separate it, continue on with your pick. We're going to come right along the top of that, get underneath the ear for the locking tab, gently lift it up, and then we'll separate this. Every time you disconnect an electrical connector, take a peek. If you see any funny colors, it's probably corrosion, and that would need to be dealt with. Now we can move along to each of our 12mm mounting bolts. You'll find 4 of these, one on each corner. I'll break all of them free real quick. Remove that hardware, give it a quick inspection, and set it aside. Now that we have all 4 of those bolts out, go ahead and clean the threads, give them a thorough inspection, apply some red thread locker. Now the next thing we need to do is carefully start breaking free our wheel bearing from the knuckle. But what you'll notice is as you start tapping on this to break it free, is generally the emergency brake shoes and the backing plate will come off with the wheel bearing. At that point, you want to be extremely careful because it could potentially swing down. And then of course, we are going to have to still separate the wheel bearing from the backing plate assembly. Now that that came off of there, the next thing that I want you to pay attention to is we're going to have to hold this in place in some way. I put the ear right along here where the caliper bracket's supposed to be, up against the back of the knuckle. That's going to hold it in place. I'll continue on with some penetrant spray in this area. After that, you're going to have to continue by driving the wheel bearing out of the area. Now let's turn this around. We'll carefully start taking the bearing out around the emergency brake shoes. There it is, friends. Now what we're going to do is move along to cleaning the mating surface along the knuckle where the backing plate's going to sit. You also want to make sure you clean the entire circular area here where the bearing's going to go into. Once you have that done, continue on to the back side of the backing plate and inside the circular area. Once you've cleaned all that, continue on to the forward side of the backing plate. We want to make sure this is a smooth surface for the new bearing to sit on. Once you have everything cleaned down properly, continue on with copper never sees. You want to make sure that you do the entire mating surface of the knuckle and of the backing plate where the bearing's going to sit. We'll make sure we get inside that circular area. Get the backing plate close to its proper position. As we're coating this, be extremely careful not to get any copper never sees on the pad material of your e-brake shoes. We'll get inside that circular area as well. Now it's going to be time to install our rear wheel bearing. Have a look at the back side. You can see that you have the ABS sensor connector protruding out through there. You want to make sure you have that facing down as you put this in position. We'll take this and we're going to start sliding it in behind the e-brake actuator. That's this lever right here. As it slides in, the wheel bearing should slide in place into the backing plate. There we are, slides right in. Now the next thing you want to do is start lining up all of your mounting holes. You're going to have 4 mounting holes on the wheel bearing, on the backing plate, and on the knuckle. We'll start lining those up, and then we'll continue on by putting in each of our 4 mounting bolts. As you're doing this, you want to make sure you start in each of the mounting bolts before you tighten any of them. All right, that one started. I'll continue on to the other 3. Now that I have all 4 of them started in by hand, I'll continue on by snugging them up, and then we'll torque each of them to manufacturer specification. Torque each of these mounting bolts to 74 foot-pounds. Now it's time to reconnect our ABS sensor. Make sure that you have your locking tab on the connector facing up. Press it in, listen for a click, give it a tug to make sure it's completely secured. We have this plastic connector protector. You'll notice along the bottom of it you have a small groove for the wire. Go ahead and put that over the wire and then put the rest of it over the rest of the connector. Lock it in, make sure it's nice and tight. Let's continue on with some copper never sees on the mating surface where our rotor is going to sit. Now I'm going to be replacing this rotor because it's in very poor condition, but what you're going to want to do with your rotor is make sure that you clean the back side of the mating surface that's going to go up against that brand new wheel bearing. Now it's time to put our brake rotor on here. Once you get it on there, you want to make sure it can spin freely. If it feels as though it does not want to spin, you need to make sure that you de-adjust your emergency brake shoes. We'll take one of our lug nuts and put it in place to hold the rotor so it does not move around while we continue. We can continue on by installing our caliper bracket. Once you feel as though you have it in place, continue on with your 2 mounting bolts. Torque this to 43 foot-pounds. Now it's time to install our ceramic brake pads. When you do this, you want to make sure you have your wear indicators facing up. Now it's going to be time to install that caliper. Before you do, let's continue on with some high temperature caliper grease. We're going to go right along the center aspect of the piston, right here. Once you have that well lubricated, continue on to the back side of each of the ears. This is going to help with vibration dampening and noise reduction. Slide that right over that caliper bracket and pads. Start in each of your mounting bolts, snug them up, and then torque them to 20 foot-pounds. Now that we have the caliper on there, let's continue on to this area here. You'll notice in your old rotor, you should have a rubber grommet. On that rubber grommet, you can see that it has this area that goes straight across all the way around. Let's press this into the rotor. Make sure it's secured. Once you've done that, continue on to your lug nut. We'll remove this, grab the wheel, put it on there, bottom it out. Now that we have the wheel up on here, we're going to go ahead and bottom out all of our lug nuts. We'll get the wheel safely back on the ground and then torque each of the lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds. With the wheel safely on the ground, let's torque these in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Okay friends, I showed you how to do your rear wheel bearing. At this point, you want to go ahead and start up the vehicle. Let it run for a little while. Make sure you don't have an ABS light and then take it for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.